I got a question recently about ketones. Not the kind that your body makes, but the kind you actually take by mouth. Before we start, quick disclosure, I do sell exogenous ketones in my supplement store. This video isn't sponsored by anyone else, and I'm not here to push mine or anyone else's product. My goal is to explain what the science actually shows, what's still uncertain, and where some of the marketing claims often get ahead of the evidence. I also want to make it clear that my position regarding the benefits of ketosis largely come as a result of what occurs when people follow a ketogenic, carnivore, or very low-carb diet, creating a state of ketosis as a result of eating that way. In fact, when most people hear the word ketosis, that's generally what comes to mind. They think of fasting, cutting carbs way down. That's what we call endogenous or metabolic ketosis. Your body makes ketones because glucose is low, so your liver steps in and produces an alternative fuel source for your body in the form of ketones when carbohydrates are either low or non-existent. Exogenous ketones, on the other hand, are different. These are supplements that you take orally that raise ketone levels in your body without fasting or avoiding carbohydrates. The main ketone produced in that state is something called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB for short. There's a lot of talk about exogenous ketones these days. A lot of online influencers are talking about it. I know Joe Rogan has talked about taking exogenous ketones, and people are taking them for a variety of different reasons. The reason scientists became interested in exogenous ketones is pretty simple. They wanted to know what ketones themselves do in the body without all the other changes that happen when you fast or follow a ketogenic diet and end up in metabolic ketosis. In other words, if ketones go up, what actually changes in your metabolism, your brain, your heart, and your immune system if you're creating a rise in the ketone level through supplementation? The research paper that I'm using for this video looked at many studies and focused on four main areas: blood sugar, inflammation, brain function, and heart health. So we'll walk through what they found. I'll put the link down in the description below if you want to read it yourself. But let's start with blood sugar, because this is where the strongest human data exists. Several studies show certain ketone supplements, especially ketone esters, can lower blood sugar. This has been seen in people who are healthy, but also in people with obesity, type 2 diabetes, or insulin resistance. In these studies, people took ketones and their blood sugar levels were lower, both fasting and after eating. Some studies followed people for a couple of weeks in real life, not just in the lab, and found that average daily blood sugar and after meal spikes were lower. That sounds impressive and it's worth paying attention to, but it's also important to understand what we don't fully know yet. Ketones seem to lower blood sugar in several ways. They may reduce how much sugar the liver makes. They may lower levels of circulating fat in the blood, which can help the body respond better to insulin. In some cases, ketones may actually increase insulin release. And this is where caution needs to come in. While short-term blood sugar improvements look real, researchers don't yet know what happens long-term with repeated ketone use, especially in people who already struggle with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. The authors of this paper are very clear about this. More research is needed before anyone claims that ketones are a long-term solution for blood sugar control. Now, let's talk about inflammation and the immune system. This is an area where things get a little more complicated. In lab and animal studies, ketones seem to reduce certain inflammatory signals. These signals are linked to chronic inflammation, which plays a role in many diseases. So on paper, ketones may look anti-inflammatory, but when researchers studied healthy humans, they sometimes saw just the opposite. In some cases, inflammation markers went up briefly after ketone supplementation. That sounds confusing, but there's a possible explanation. Ketones may behave differently depending on whether someone already has a lot of inflammation going on. In people with obesity who often have low-level chronic inflammation, a couple of weeks of ketone use reduced inflammatory markers at the cellular level. That didn't always show up on standard blood tests, but it did when immune cells were studied more closely. The takeaway here is that ketones may help calm inflammation when inflammation is already present, but they may not act the same way in people who are already healthy and don't have a lot of inflammation going on. Now let's move on to the brain, which is one of the most interesting areas here. Ketones easily cross into the brain and can be used as fuel, and the brain actually operates very well on ketones. We've known this for a long time. What's newer is evidence that raising ketone levels with supplements may actually improve certain aspects of thinking, memory, especially in people whose brains may not be using glucose efficiently. Some small studies in people with memory problems, type 2 diabetes, or obesity have shown improvements in things like working memory, processing speed, or mental performance after ketone use. There are also early studies in Alzheimer's disease that suggest possible benefits. This doesn't mean that ketones cure dementia, and anyone saying they do is exaggerating, but it does suggest that ketones may help support brain energy use in certain situations. Researchers still aren't sure exactly how this works. It could be better fuel delivery, improved blood flow, reduced inflammation, or changes in brain signaling. Most likely it's some combination of these things. Heart health is another area where interest is growing with ketone supplementation. The heart can use ketones as fuel, and in people with heart failure, the heart may actually rely on ketones more than normal. Animal studies suggest ketones may support heart function, and human studies are beginning to show changes like improved blood flow, lower blood pressure, and increased cardiac output after ketone use. Some studies also show lower triglycerides without clear negative effects on cholesterol in the short term. But once again, the long-term picture isn't clear yet. Improved numbers don't always mean improved outcomes, and researchers have been very careful not to overstate the findings. So what does all this mean in real life? Well, first, exogenous ketones are not a weight loss miracle. They're not a replacement for exercise, good nutrition, protein intake, optimal sleep, or strength training. They're not a way to ignore the basics and still be healthy. If someone is selling ketones as a shortcut around discipline and lifestyle change, that's a big red flag that you should pay attention to. At the same time, ketones don't seem to be useless. They clearly raise ketone levels and trigger real physiological effects. Based on what we know now, they may be helpful as a tool in certain situations. That might include working on blood sugar control, people dealing with certain cognitive challenges, or possibly people with heart issues under medical supervision. But they're a tool, not a cure, and not everyone needs them. There are also practical issues with ketone supplementation. Ketone supplements can be expensive. Some don't taste great. Some can cause stomach upset, especially certain ketone salts with high mineral content. Ketone esters tend to be more effective at raising ketone levels, but they also cost more and still aren't exactly fun to drink. Timing matters too. Ketones may act differently if you take them fasted versus after a meal, or if they're combined with exercise. Those details matter more than a lot of marketing admits. So here's my bottom line. If you're metabolically healthy and your goal is general fitness and aging well, you might not need exogenous ketones at all. If you focus on lifting weights, staying active, eating enough protein, getting great sleep, and keeping your blood sugar in check through your diet, there's a big bang for the buck in doing those things. If you're dealing with blood sugar issues, cognitive concerns, or closely tracking metabolic markers and looking for targeted tools, exogenous ketones may be worth discussing with your doctor. But it makes sense to keep expectations realistic and not confuse an interesting metabolic signal with a magic solution to everything. As always, if you have medical conditions or take medications that affect blood glucose or heart function, talk to your doctor before using exogenous ketones. If you've ever taken exogenous ketones, leave a comment below. Let me know if they helped you in some way or not. Again, not every supplement is right for everyone, so it's reasonable to take a cautious approach to supplementation. If you missed this last video about creatine, you can watch it next. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please share this video with someone you feel would benefit from watching it as well. All the best to you, and I will see you in the next video.